So let's move this beach walker over to the other side of this picture. For this, we're going to use the Content Aware Move tool. And we're just going to do it on a single layer. We're going to do it, however, semi-non-destructively, and I'll show you how. Now, the key to this is this often unused panel, at least by me, the history panel. So if you don't have it on this little bit of the sidebar here, you can either reset your workspace back to the Essentials Classic, or you can go to Window and History. And that'll open it up. And to begin with, all we're going to do is create a history state. So we'll just click on this little icon that looks like a camera, and then we will create what they call a snapshot. And I'm just going to name this Original. And basically what this does is saves all of the pixels on that layer so that we can refer to them later. For now, we can close up this panel, and let's get to moving this fellow over to the other side. So I will go to the healing tool that we want to use, which is the Content Aware Move tool. And I'm just going to make a loose selection around him. And I'm not going to be, too careful. Just try to get close to him, but not too close, because part of the problem with this tool is if you get too close to the thing that you want to move, it's not going to be able to blend the edge pixels in very cleanly. So it needs to have a bit to chew on. Also, when it reconstructs it in the new place, if you get too close to the actual image, it will sometimes distort the image that you're trying to actually keep. So it's best not to get too close with this. So we have our selection made, and I'm going to move it over. And if you want to move over so it's on the same horizon, I can press Shift while I'm dragging, and then we'll just position it there. And right now, it is just giving us a preview of where it was before and where it is now. And if I like that, I can go ahead and click on the check mark. Okay. And you'll see that we still have this, we actually have this active here at the top on the options bar. So that means we can actually make some settings before we, even though we put a check mark to say, yes, this is where I want this to go, we actually do have more that we can do. And in fact, you need to do before you deselect, because these things will go away because this is really a destructive workflow. The problem here is it's kind of hard to tell how well this is being blended in because we have these dancing ants. So I don't know about you, but that's kind of distracting for me. So we can actually get rid of them, but still have our thing selected. We just go to View and Show, and then we'll turn off Selection Edges. And there we go. And as you see, we have these two, Structure and Color. And what these do is they more progressively blend the pasted pixels. The higher numbers will, make it more blended in with the area. Lower numbers will try to keep the original pixels as much as possible. And you see, for us, we have a structure of 4 and a color of 0. It seems to be doing a pretty good job, but some of the edges aren't really meshing in very well. So let's see, maybe if we adjust the color a bit. So let's take that up to maybe 7. It actually goes all the way up to 10. And if you notice, it actually changes on the pixels that he was taken from as well, because that is actually part of this tool, is it's creating new pixels over here, as well as blending in the new pixels where it's been pasted. So 10 looks like it's adjusted as skin tone, and that's not necessarily what we want. So we'll take it down. Maybe 7 is better. And it looks like most of the edge pixels are pretty nicely being blended there. So that's looking pretty good. Structure, let's see what happens if we increase that to the maximum, which for some reason is 7. So at 7, it looks like that. If we take it down to 1, it actually works in the opposite direction. So the lower numbers will actually try to melt the pixels into where they were originally, whereas the higher number will try to keep the original pixels as much as possible. So probably with a higher number on this, maybe even 7 is fine. So 7 and 7. Interesting. Okay, that's just what we worked out with. Depending on how your selection is made, you may have different numbers. But the trick is to just kind of play with these numbers until you can find something that looks halfway decent. And we're going to clean it up with a new tool that we haven't used before. So this is looking pretty good now. And remember, we actually still have a selection made. And in case you didn't believe me, we can go to View and Show, and we'll turn on Selection Edges. Okay, great. So now we can deselect. So I'm pressing Command D. Windows user would press Control D. And then we're going to switch to the History Brush tool, which is under the regular brush tool if you have this 2-column layout like me. So I'll select that, History Brush tool. And how this brush works is, let's go back to the history panel here. And I need to make this a little bigger so we can actually see that little snapshot we made. Now, I'm not going to click on the snapshot. I'm just going to click on the space next to the snapshot, which you'll see there's currently an icon for beachwalker.jpg. So I'll click on Original, and then that will change the brush so it pulls pixels from a few minutes ago before we move this guy into place. You see that there are some areas around the feet that probably really didn't get melted in properly. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to make sure that we're using a soft round brush, and then we'll just paint in that area a bit. And this is working destructively, but also it's kind of non-destructive because these are the pixels that were originally there. So we're just putting them back. Initially, I'm working with the soft brush. We may have to work with a harder brush if we have some kind of areas or objects that we don't actually need in there. Like this wave breaking, you'll see on his leg there. That was actually copied from here, but the wave stopped breaking at that point, so it looks funny to have it here. So what we can do with that is we'll change to the hard round brush, and then that will allow us to get a lot closer, since we don't want that at all. So we don't need those pixels. We just have to be pretty careful not to go into his leg. We just want to get rid of that, the waves. All right, great. So now it looks like we have just a little bit more work around the feet to get those moved in. And I may want to zoom in, so I'll press Spacebar Command and then click a few times, and then I can press the spacebar and move it into place so it's a little easier to work with. I'll use my opening bracket key to make the brush smaller, and then we'll just get in this area here, and you may have to get pretty tiny. One thing to note is that when you're using a small brush, even if it's a soft brush, if it's very tiny, it's almost essentially a hard brush. So you don't want to use the soft brush forever. You always want to use the biggest brush that you can get away with when you're doing the soft brush, because generally you are trying to blend pixels rather than actually painting. So I'm blending the original background in with these pixels that we pasted. And I don't want to get too close to his foot, so I'll probably just change to that. And so we'll just kind of mush those in there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good down there. Maybe, yeah, I'm just going to use the soft brush to get some of those ripples back. Looks like those were, taken out. And here too. So, yeah, it kind of destroys some of the texture as well. So it doesn't really pay attention to that with this kind of destructive way of working. But it it can be useful. And as you see, it's doing this just on one layer. So it's kind of convenient sometimes. But for the most part, if you're doing this kind of thing, it may wind up being easier and look better if you just use a different type of workflow that's actually non-destructive. But this is looking pretty good. Just a little bit of extra work to make this tool really work quite a bit better. And we can take another look over here, and those are looking pretty good. So I think we've taken care of this man, and there's just still a little bit of halos around his feet here. Just getting some finishing touches here. Okay, so it looks like we got all of the areas that were kind of distracting. Now we can take care of these footsteps on the other side. For this, we'll go ahead and work non-destructively. So I am going to create a new layer, and then we'll change from the content aware move tool to the spot healing brush tool. And with this, we can change the size, change the hardness, and we just want to get rid of those footsteps. And we also want to make sure we have sample all layers selected. And that way it's going to be able to paint on this layer by itself. So let's just quickly paint through that. And since I'm using a soft brush, I'm painting more of the area because the edges are going to be faded out. And that looks pretty good. So with a soft round brush, you get kind of fading out on the edges, which I found that works better with these healing tools, is not using a hard edge. But remember, when you are using a soft edge brush, you generally have to go with a larger brush if you want to get the thing inside removed. So let's turn that off, turn it back on. Looks pretty good. All right, I think we're done. So he's over on the other side. We've taken care of any aberrations. Like I said, it's not perfect, but also we didn't have to create any other layer for him. We didn't have to edit a mask or anything like, fancy like that. It was just a process of a few minutes work. And sometimes that's all you need to do is just work destructively. And then, of course, we did a little bit of non-destructive with this, removing the footsteps. So I'll call that footsteps. So we remember what it was that we were covering. All right, and that's it.